Hello everyone and welcome to week 6, day 2. If you remember from the day 1 video, I said that this week we were going to be dealing with computers in the medical office and managing the patient records. That meant that we were learning about chapters 7, 12, and 13. In the day 1 video, I talked about chapter 12, which was dealing with the computers. So today I'm going to touch on chapters 7 and 13. So let's jump on in and get started. So chapter 7 is dealing with telephones and telephone technique. Like computers that we learned in the day 1 video, the telephone is one of the most vital tools used within the medical office. The key within the office is to ensure that everyone and every phone encounter is not only courteous, but also efficient, accurate, and professional. Attention to detail is required when you're answering the phone, taking a message, or taking a refill request from patients. The fundamental rule to remember is when you're answering the telephone in the medical office, it's not like you're answering it at home. So for example, I know that when I'm working in the field, I answer my phone very differently than I do if I'm at home. At home, I see the phone call come in, I answer it, and I go, hey, what's up? I don't answer my medical phone that way. I say, good morning, this is Corey, how can I help you? Totally different than if I'm at home. You also don't want to answer and go, hey girl, how you doing? Right? We don't talk like that in the medical profession. Now, most medical offices will provide you with a script that you can follow when you're answering the phone. But as always, you want to make sure that you are pleasant and professional. When you're answering the phone in the medical office, there are 5 key items or 5 key rules to keep in mind when you're answering. Number 1, you want to smile. Always answer the phone with a smile on your face and a smile in your voice. Act like the patient's right there in front of you. If you answer the phone with a smile, the patient's more likely to be open with you than if you sound like you're mean and angry. 2, have a good greeting. So answering the phone quickly is usually what we say within 3 rings is quickly. And for your greeting, you want to include things such as the name of the office or the physician, your name, and asking the caller how can you be of assistance. So for example, I work for OSF Rock Cut. And when I would answer the phones, I would answer it and I would say, good morning, this is Corey with Rock Cut Crossing. How can I help you? Or, thank you for calling OSF Rock Cut. This is Corey. How can I help you? Or how can I direct your call? Getting that good greeting out sets a good tone for the entire telephone conversation. Rule number 3, you want to watch your speech. You want to make sure that you are using clarity, which means that you are making sure that you are understood. Nothing should be in your mouth, so no chewing gum, no eating at your desks, no candy or cough drops or anything like that. You want to make sure that your mouth is completely open so when you're speaking, you can be heard easily and understood well. You also want to enunciate your words, meaning that you make them more clearly articulated and you pronounce them clearly. I know that's something that I try very hard to do, not only in the classroom, but also on these videos. I want to make sure I'm enunciating my words so that way you can understand what I'm saying and what is being said to you. You also want to watch the pitch in your voice when you're talking on a phone. Changes in the pitch and the tone or how you say a phrase can influence the patient's perception of the office. So for example, if let's say that I'm having a bad day or someone says something that strikes my nerve, the way that I say a sentence may be different. So for example, I can say, hi, how are you doing? Or I can say, hi, how are you doing? You see how that change in my pitch and my voice does give you a bit of a different feeling? You don't want that for your patients. You want them to feel welcomed into the clinic, even if it is just on a phone call. Number 4, you want to identify the caller. It's important that you ask the patient to identify themselves. So for example, asking them for their first and last name and their date of birth. That way you have the most correct patient in front of you. Now, if you ever had a situation where the person's first and last name and birth date were the same as someone else, you would ask them to verify their home address. You will never have their social security number, so that's never an option to have them verify. And number 5, you want to listen to your patient. Listening is so critical to managing telephone calls. Callers also don't like to be asked to repeat themselves, so if you can, trying to get everything out in the first part or first run through of them saying something is really important. Now, I'm not saying that we have to be savants and know everything that they're going to say, but at the same time, maybe just listen to them and maybe do okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that you're having a problem with X, Y, Z. Then you're not asking them to repeat themselves, but doing a teach back to see if you actually heard what they were saying correctly. Now there is so much more to Chapter 7, but this is where I'm going to stop for the video and leave you to read it on your own and discover what other information it does provide. We will be working with an exercise on telephone etiquette, so make sure that you are prepared for that when you come to class. So Chapter 13 is dealing with managing paper medical records. And more often than not, you will be working in a clinic with electronic charts, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to know this information or that this chapter isn't important, because it very much so is. Not all places have medical records online now. There are still smaller clinics that do have medical paper charts. The medical record contains all written documents that relate to the patient's health care. So regardless of whether it's paper or electronic, they're still holding those patient health records. The medical record is a legal document, a permanent record, and a tool that is used by the medical staff to communicate with their office and with other offices or other physicians. Because this medical record is a legal document, everything that is done during a patient's visit, over the phone, or discussed during an email communication must be documented in a chart. If it is not documented, then it wasn't done. That's the motto that we tend to follow in the medical practice. Entries should be documented in black ink only. Handwriting should be clear and easy to read. This is part of the reason that we went to electronic health records, because some of the doctor handwriting was very difficult to read. But now that we have the electronic health records, that's not a problem. You also want to make sure that you sign and date all entries. Now, signing and dating means that your signature should be your first initial, last initial, and your title. So, for example, my name is Carissa Legg, and I'm a certified medical assistant. So my signature would be CL, CMA. And documenting should be done in a factual-based manner. That means that statements made by the patient and the physician's assessment both must be placed in there. Even if you think the patient is making something up, at that point when they say it, they believe it is factual. Now, we're all human and we make errors in the chart sometimes. When you're making a correction in a medical record, always make sure that the correction is done by the individual who made it. So that means if I go into a chart and I see that my friend Casey has made an error, I don't get to make the change for Casey. I have to take it to Casey herself and say, hey, I found an error in the chart. Can you please fix it? Now, there are some rules that we follow to make sure that the error is taken care of correctly. First and foremost, you never want to erase the error or use whiteout. We cannot do that in the medical record. That means you falsified records if you do that. Instead, you want to simply draw one line through the error so that the original entry can still be seen. You want to put your initials and the date above the line and write the word error. Once that is done, you can write the new correction. So if you can look at the picture here, where it says infusion start time, you can see that originally it said 13:15. Well, they realized that was an error, so they drew one line through 15, they initialed it and they dated it, and above it they put the correction, which was 26. Same thing with the infusion stop time and the acquisition start and end times. Now, if you do find an error in a chart and it was not your error, but someone else's, the best thing to do is to not come to them directly in front of either patients or other coworkers, but instead ask to speak with them privately so that you don't embarrass them or you don't make a big scene out in the open where it's not necessary. And it's very important to understand that the medical record itself, being the legal document that it is owned by the patient. Now, the facility that created the information owns the physical or electronic record, but the actual medical record itself is patient-based and patient-owned. Patients have the right to view their medical record, and if they want to, they are always able to present or have a staff member present. So we can either have them request it where they can see it and they're on, in front of you, or they can request their record and they can take a copy home for themselves. Now, because the patient owns the medical record, we need their permission in order to release any records. That could be anything from sending records to the insurance companies for reimbursement, specialty providers, or even if you're taking it to be seen by another physician because you want a second opinion. That's why we have all of our patients receive and sign a notice of privacy practices when they are a new patient, and after that it's every year annually. This form means that the patient gives the consent to the medical office to use and disclose their information for treatment, payment, and operations as defined by HIPAA. Remember, HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Alright guys, this is where I am going to stop for the video. As always, please make sure that you are reading your chapters in full, as they are full of great information that you may see not only in class that we deal with, but also on your quiz, final, or even potentially on your certified exam at the end of your schooling. If you do have any questions, please make sure that you are bringing them to class so we can talk about them in an open discussion. And if not, I will see all of you on day 2 of week number 6. Bye, guys.